I've been grinding out the speedrun for Gears 5 Hivebusters. Along with the help of my new Series X, I've dropped the time down pretty quickly and already have world record. Despite that, I want the final run that I post to YouTube to be one that performs exceedingly well. I don't think I'm too far off from getting a time I'll be happy with, but while I work on that, I thought I'd give you guys a turbo rundown of what the route looks like right now. There are a handful of strats that I really like, but just haven't been able to string together all of them in a run so far. Today, we're going to talk about some of the difficulties in doing that. So the first real speed tech of the game is right when you jump up after reuniting with all your teammates. This area doesn't let you roadie run, but you can actually dodge roll. And so if you roll forward, it speeds you up a bit, but your camera gets wrenched away and you have to look at the emergency beacon hanging down from the trees. You can throw out a quick melee to cancel out of the soft cutscene, and then use a roll to cancel out of that melee, speeding up that section by a good amount. The next interesting part of the movement is when you drop down into the swamp and there's water everywhere. This water would usually affect your movement speed as it makes you much slower. Dodge rolls as well as cover sliding are not slowed down by this penalty, and so you can make use of those to quickly run through the swamp and go to the end fight, which is the only part that actually matters. Picking up the tri-shot by the ruins makes quick work of the flock that they throw at you for no real reason. Then you can jump down into the ruins and use your electro blade on the way out to speed through to the next part. The next unique movement tech is on these double ledges when you're coming down into the beach area. Usually the game makes you drop down and slow walk out under the ruins to make it to the beach. But if you carefully time a roll off the first ledge, a melee to both cancel out of the roll and prevent you from walking off the second ledge, and then a late roll on the second ledge, you can jump down the majority of the walking distance and make it under the rubble much more quickly. So now in the beach section, there are a few different ways of how to clear it, but what I do is I run up and assassinate the first guy before running around the left-hand side wreaking havoc with the overkill and rocket launcher. This strat is actually very consistent, but the couple things you want to watch out for are being too early on the first assassination, which will just force you to melee him rather than getting the assassinate and alerts everyone, or getting trolled by the idle animation on your overkill, which will make your shots delayed and oftentimes cause you to straight up miss. The instant you miss one extra shot and have to reload, this area slows down tremendously. There is another variant of this clear where you do just shoot the gas tanks immediately and run around the side with your gun as normal, but it does seem slightly jank to me even if it's potentially faster. The only thing left in this section is to hope that Mac doesn't soft lock on this button, which seems to happen like half the times in actual runs, but didn't happen any of the times where I was trying to record it. Then it's a matter of learning all the spawns for the 3 waves of enemies and reacting to them accordingly. Bonus points if you get the teleporting Scion. One of the most annoying parts of the game right now is the bot teleport in Sanctum. It seems like it works for me very consistently in practice, but oftentimes in a run, it literally just will not work. The main idea behind this time save is that with some quick movement, you can get to the button, open up the doors, and walk inside to trigger a load that teleports your teammates forward. Now, I don't know if that's exactly what's going on, but that's what makes sense to me with other Gears game knowledge. Some things that make the bot teleport more finicky than it probably should be are playing Lahni over Keegan, which overall Lahni is better anyway, so worth it. The frame rate of your console or system, which having better frames and better loads is worth it as well. And picking up the torque bow about halfway through the movement, which again, worth it for some of the upcoming sections. If I end up not getting the bot teleport in my final run, I'll live with it. The first use of that torque bow is right after killing all the rejects. You can use it to get a quick kill on the stump, which would otherwise take like 10 seconds to kill without it. In the next room, there's some unique movement manipulation of all the rejects, which lets you get a very fast kill, as long as they don't body block you or run out of the shock area. After that, you can use some creative frag placements and a single magazine of an overkill to come down to the Cryo Scion and torque him in the face. However, he doesn't die in just one bolt, so he does need a little bit extra to top him off. Right after that, a cool little Easter egg is using the cryo cannon on the fire grenades in the back to get cryo grenades. Not only is it just a cool Easter egg, but the cryo grenades are actually really useful in the final fight against the carrier, which we'll talk about in just a few more rooms. In the same room as the cryo grenades, use the cryo cannon to do a pretty simple clear on all the juvies as they spawn, use Lahni's electro blade to run through the fire without dying, and kill a handful of other enemies before moving on to the cryo silo room. Now, here's another place where having a Series X is actually kind of disadvantageous. Whether it has something to do with the higher frame rate, or just being the enhanced edition for the console, for some reason this Bastion unit that used to die in one torque never does anymore, so you have to clean them up with a little bit of pistol after that. But again, overall, the torque bow is way useful because it lets you headshot the Scion down at the end. Then I pretty much hope for some good RNG from enemy placements and the AI helping me out, but sometimes there's an enemy stuck somewhere that I can never seem to find. You can use the cryo cannon in the back of the room to make short work of the flocks, and blast the emerging pouncer from the other room with your overkill before it even does anything. The final fight of this chapter is when you drop downstairs to fight the carrier. There are a few different ways to fight it, and they're all equally valid. The clear that I do in my runs involves freezing the carrier with cryo grenades that we got before, cracking it open with the GL special, and finishing it off with the electro coil up top. When this strat works, it deletes both the carrier and the remaining juvies in the room, and leads to a really fast clear. This is where we get hit with a little bit of a downside from the Series X again. Here, for sure, the enhanced frame rate affects the carrier's ability to get frozen in just one cryo grenade, like on a regular Xbox One, so I have to throw 2. Sometimes the carrier won't even freeze with those 2, or it could lead to me getting stunned by its projectile attack. When this happens, it gives the juvies just enough time to spread out and make this room miserable and cleaning them up afterwards. One little thing I do to try to mitigate that risk is attempting to juke the projectile by sliding to the cover on the right. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Throughout the level, but especially after the carrier, Lahni's Electroblade is of course used to speed up the movement a bunch. In this section, you get a straightaway to make full use of the ability, and you save about 5 seconds for each of the 2 uses. But be sure to grab a claw before you go. The next chapter is pretty much a giant auto-scroller where you ride a metal door down a river of lava. Any differences in level clear times here come down to getting the insta-clear on this flock, which is difficult but consistent, but difficult, and getting good enemy kills on certain key checkpoints through the level. The reason for getting the claw in the last part is that it makes these clears way faster. The next chapter of the run is set in Lahni's village. It starts out with you just doing a bunch of walking and talking, no real way to speed it up other than keeping your lines straight. When you get to the main building where you find out everyone is dead, make sure to trade for Keegan's GL because you're going to use it in the upcoming fight. As soon as the doors open, use Lahni's Electroblade to run down the side, you don't have to fight any of them, and trade out for the boom shot. The upcoming fight is one of the hardest in the entire run. Here you need to use your explosives that you've picked up along the way, and use them to kill the enemies that cluster up inside the market stalls. Keep an eye on the Therons or Hunters because they can turn invisible, frag tag the sign up top, and then clean out anyone remaining. Since you can leave the enemies alive from the previous section, it's important to be able to recognize which enemies you do actually have to kill and which ones you don't. Because of having these extra enemies in the mix, there are a bunch of different ways in which this section can go wrong, and even when this isn't a catastrophic failure, oftentimes there's one extra dude hanging out on the right. Run up the stairs to the next area, clustering the juvies in 3 groups. Try to use spare boomshot shells, or make use of the frags strapped to some of the juvies to clean them out quickly. Fighting the warden is actually pretty straightforward. After waiting a brief moment to make sure his iframes go away, either blap him a bunch with a boomshot, or dump your frags on him and watch him explode. This next area features a bunch of enemies that you again don't have to fight. You can run past all of them quickly with Lahni's Electroblade. When you get to the next checkpoint though, you will have to reload your checkpoint. Once the checkpoint loads, you can kamikaze with the boom shot to kill the first 2 enemies, climb up the ladder, and clean up everyone else. Then you get everyone's favorite invention from Gears 3, the silverback mech. In the next part, you do have to kill pretty much all of the enemies, but you can skip about half of them and depend on your AI to kill most of them in the back. Now this does obviously cause problems because sometimes they can leave a single juvie that prohibits the next part from loading, but otherwise when you get under the bridge, you can use your rockets to clear out a whole bunch of enemies quickly as they spawn, and then use your minigun to kill the remaining few. In the next part, all you have to do is memorize the pouncer spawns and kill them as they land. The Hunt is a chapter very similar to Into the Fire, where it's pretty much an auto-scroller, punctuated by a few fights that you can actually optimize. The first 2 are pretty straightforward. You run up and try to group enemies as much as possible again with your boomshot or explosives, watching out for the Snatcher at the end of the second one, and grab a claw on the way out if you didn't already. Be careful because the Snatcher can hit you at angles that you might not expect. And the third fight is a little bit more complicated. The overall strategy for this part is that you plant frags on the middle and right sides, so that you can use your claw to shoot the left and middle as they spawn. At the end of the second wave, there will be a bastion that spawns, but if you're fast enough, it won't have anything left to protect. When the flock comes in, it pretty much always does its tornado attack over on the right, so if you stand on the left, you can get an easy 2-shot GL special to take it out. The carrier at the end is irrelevant, so do whatever in the meantime. Finish out the level with some dodge roll movement, and then use Lahni's Electroblade for some extra speed. The final chapter of the game starts out with a bunch of areas where you can only walk, jog, or roll. It's not too bad, it just takes a couple runs to remember where you can do what. In the first juvie section, you want to kill everything that comes down from the left building, run up the middle, trigger all of those spawns, and finish off with the juvies spawning on the right side. Once you get used to it enough, you can let your AI clean up the last few so that you can keep roadie running all the way down to the next objective. Every now and then you'll have a friend follow you though. In the next part after you slide down, go crazy with your Nasher and frag tag the Scion, and pick up its heavy weapon to take out the Pouncers. In the next juvie section, take the upper path because it's a lot easier to control the spawns. Keep in mind that some of them only trigger once you've walked a certain distance forward, and that you have multiple weapons at your disposal, so if one runs out of ammo, you can switch to the others and keep frying them. As with the first section, once you start getting the feel for things, you can leave the last couple enemies to your teammates and run ahead to the next part. At the Crashed Condor, kill the small guys however you want, use the GL special to take out the DR1s and as many trackers as possible, favor picking up the tri-shot over the rocket salvos, and if you ration your shots, you should be able to clear both the inside and outside using just that. In the three-way battle between the Swarm, DBs, and yourself, focus your GL specials and anything else on the Swarm, make your way up and around to the left side, and do your best to clean up any stragglers. There's a lot of RNG for who wins this fight, but just do your best to adapt to the outcome. The final auto-scroller of the game is the boat ride to the Wakatu. You can kill the enemies that board it if you want, or just practice your bouncing. The Wataku final boss has two distinct phases. For the first phase, just blast it a bunch with the overkill that you definitely should have picked up during the boat ride over here. For the second one, grab the torque bow that's just a few steps away from where you drop down, and hit 3 or 4 bolts on the flying Wataku. And when it emerges to use its noxious breath attack, use Lahni's Electro Blade to cut the Wataku's health down as much as possible. In doing this, her blade deals the perfect amount of damage without flinching or over-damaging the boss, thus avoiding a super slow second ground cycle. While it dives underground, refill your torque a little bit with Keegan's ammo aura. If you've done everything correctly, the Wataku should leap back into the sky and be low enough that just a few more torques will take it out. So that's pretty much it. The run is pretty consistent, except for those few key sections I pointed out along the way. Hopefully this was marginally entertaining for you, and if you there watching this decide to learn the speedrun, maybe it's even useful to you. Anyway, thanks for viewing and vibing, see you on the next one.